Grid tonight. Will Brown is entering NASCAR Chicago Street Race. Can he contend for the win in his one-off with Kaulig Racing? Supercars will race twice in New Zealand starting in 2026. How important is this for New Zealand's two islands? Marcus Ericsson was one of the three drivers disqualified from the Indy 500. How close did IndyCar get to a nightmare scenario of a disqualified crown jewel race winner? Hello to all of our viewers watching here in the United States and around the world. Welcome to Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. I'm Kobe Lambert, and with me, Matt White from Grid and Darius Performing Endless. Before we get into everything tonight, want to apologize for being 30 minutes late. Had a little technical difficulties tonight, but we're still here, committed to doing this show tonight and discussing this week's news. And we definitely encourage you all to interact with us in the chat, support us through Super Chat, and visit gridnetworktv.com for our latest content. Now, Matt, take it away with our top stories this evening.
Thank you, Kobe. Hello, everybody. Good evening and hello, wherever you're watching us around the world. No Josh tonight. He's got internet issues. We're going to struggle on regardless, just the two of us, to get this show on the road. And we start with NASCAR-related supercars news because defending Supercars champion Will Brown will come across to compete in the NASCAR Cup Series race on the streets of Chicago this summer. Brown will drive the number 13 Chevrolet for Kaulig Racing with sponsorship from Mobile X and Shaw and Partners Financial Services. He'll be the third Kaulig car as teammate to AJ Allmendinger and Ty Dillon. Brown made his his Cup Series debut last summer at Sonoma with RCR Richard Childress Racing and was very impressive before an electrical gremlin caused him to finish 31st. The 2024 Supercars champion said after watching Shane Van Gisbergen win on debut at Chicago and competing in the Cup Series last year himself at Sonoma, he wanted to compete this year at the Chicago Street Race. He also felt very happy about the Supercars calendar aligning this year, which will allow him to go to Charlotte early to prepare for the Chicago race, courtesy on screen, or photo courtesy on screen of Kaulig Racing. We want to hear from you on this because it's just me. Normally, I'd be answering Josh's question here. So if you're in the comment section and you're watching us live, get involved. What do you think about this with Brown coming across? Good opportunity for him to contend for a win. Will it be SVG versus Will Brown, the guy that replaced SVG at Red Bull Ampol, against him now in the Cup Series in Chicago? Going to be a mouth-watering thing to see if those guys can get it together at Chicago in a few races' time. Also from the NASCAR and Supercar crossover this week, and this one features on the Xfinity Series in what some people are calling the Supercars invasion. Another one is heading to America. Jack Perkins will make his Xfinity Series debut at Portland towards the end of August. He will drive the number 19 Toyota for Joe Gibbs Racing with sponsorship again from Shaw and Partners Financial Services, the same sponsor that Brown has on the side of his Cup car for Chicago. Perkins arrived in North Carolina last week to visit JGR shop, as you can see in the photo on screen. He met the team and did a seat fitting and to spend some time in the TRD simulator to get practice time in for his Xfinity run at Portland in August. He said he first started to think about coming to NASCAR in 2008 when he came over to watch Marcus Ambrose race at Sonoma and to be a spotter for Paul Morris, who was racing in the ARCA West race that same weekend. Perkins also gave credit to his old childhood friend James Small, who currently serves as Chase Briscoe's crew chief in the Cup Series, former crew chief, of course, of Martin Truex Jr. One JGR executive said Small highly recommended Perkins to the team when they were searching for a driver to put in their Xfinity car for Portland. The photo courtesy of Jack Perkins. If you're wondering why we're seeing more drivers from Supercars giving NASCAR a try, motorsport journalist Kelly Crandall asked Will Brown about this, and Brown said that Supercars drivers don't have to adapt too much since their Gen 3 car has similarities compared to the next Gen Cup car, and added that more drivers wanted to try NASCAR after seeing SVG's historic win in Chicago a couple of years ago. Link to that interview is in the video description. So how do we think Jack Perkins is going to go? Aussie Jack Perkins, to use James Courtney's nickname that he's termed for JP. How do we think he's going to go in the Xfinity Series? I think he's going to go extremely well. And he's got extremely good equipment, as we know from JGR. So Aussie Jack is going to come and make some waves, you would think, in that Portland race. Get involved, and we'll get your comments up on screen about that and the Will Brown stuff as the show rolls on. Hello to Adam, who says he's happy to see Jack Perkins living a dream. Absolutely. He's been a stalwart in the Supercars Championship for a very long time, in between Super 2 and the main series. And it'll be great to see him coming over. Joe will be in Portland, of course, for that race at Grid Network's home track. I think Will Brown should aim for a top 5 finish. I agree with you, Joe. I think we saw how good Brody went in that car at Indianapolis a couple of years ago when it was with RCR, of course, and how well Will went, all the W's, at Sonoma last year, as well, before his technical problems put him out of the race, with SVG, of course, spotting for Will Brown at Sonoma last year. Adam says we need to get Jack Perkins on the show. Yes, I think that is absolutely a priority, and Joe agrees. So if you've got any comments about Will Brown coming to Chicago and Jack Perkins coming to Portland, Adam says he's looking for a top 10 for Jack Perkins. I think it's going to be more than that, Adam. I think he's going to be top 5 and competing for the win. All good to see crossover. There's been lots of talk about crossover and stuff post Indianapolis and Kyle Larson and stuff, hasn't there, on social media this week? So more of that going on. Going to be awesome. Now we need Supercars to come back to the USA for a proper round. I'm guessing Adam means there. He did the one off at COTA and I haven't been back since. That was 2013 off the top of my head. So been a long time. In there, the story we're about to get to, calendar expansion, Kobe, going on in the Supercars calendar coming up. 2 rounds in New Zealand are going to be happening very, very soon.
I said, before we get to that, man, I think there was another story that we needed to touch on about international drivers in NASCAR. I think you might have skipped that one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've completely skipped that. My bad.
Yes, we'll get to New Zealand in a moment.
I know we're all over the place tonight. Keeping with the theme of international drivers competing in NASCAR, there was an announcement yesterday afternoon about the addition of 2 international provisionals. NASCAR is increasing the field size for the Xfinity Series race in Mexico from 38 up to 40. Those provisionals will be determined based on qualifying. Teams that qualify 39th and 40th will not be eligible for prize money or points, regardless of their race finishing position. At the moment, NASCAR expects 39 cars to enter the race next month at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, and given the big effort to cross the southern border to Mexico, NASCAR felt it was fair to provide an exemption to allow teams willing to make all that effort to start the race. This will be the middle of a brutal 3-week stretch for travel for the industry, going from Michigan to Mexico and then back to Pocono. Of course, that's not for the Cup Series, that's for Xfinity as well. They're all going to be doing it, both series, courtesy of the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. Well, do we think this is a good thing to support a pair of international provisionals that could prevent a nightmare scenario for some of the smaller teams? Yeah, there's going to be people coming to want to do that race. We know Christopher Bell is sliding in to do that, and Daniel Suarez has also been announced. Terry's going to tell you about that, I think, in the news section later on, taking that ride away from SVG for that Xfinity race to have him in both races of the weekend. I'm not sure why that wasn't a thing anyway, to be honest. But who's going to stand up and get themselves in the Xfinity race? That's going to be interesting. We'll have perhaps a few locals dropping in to some of the smaller funded rides down there, and who else will be available and can get to Mexico and have a steer, has a chance of getting in that race now with the extended grid. So that's going to be very, very interesting to see who puts their hands up and gets the deal together to go to Mexico City in the Xfinity Series in a couple of weeks' time. Very much looking forward to that race on Father's Day weekend. Now, Kobe, we can talk about Supercars going to New Zealand for 2 races.
That's right. We're going to keep talking about Supercars here, but in a different way. And for the first time in the history of the Repco Supercars Championship, they'll host 2 race weekends in New Zealand on both the North Island and South Island. Starting with the North Island, Taupo International Motorsport Park Senate is still to continue hosting Supercars through the end of the 2028 season. On the South Island, Supercars will host its first ever event at Ruapuna Raceway through the end of 2028, guaranteeing 2 race weekends in New Zealand for the next 3 years, starting in 2026. Louise Upston, New Zealand's tourism and hospitality minister, said for over 2 decades, supercars have played an important role in showcasing the country, and is thrilled to have a race on the South Island in Christchurch next year. Outgoing Supercars CEO Shane Howard called Christchurch a motorsport city and believes Ruapuna has huge potential. Graphic courtesy of the track. Matt, are you looking forward to the Supercars doubleheader in New Zealand? What are your initial thoughts on Ruapuna Raceway?
Yeah, really looking forward to this. More rounds in the Supercars calendar, the better. This has been talked about for ages, having 2 rounds in New Zealand, whether they both be on the North or the South Island or whatever. Um, I know it's pie in the sky, but I would have liked to have had Taupo and then a street track somewhere like we had with Hamilton 15 odd years ago, maybe now off the top of my head, end of the 2000s into 2010, 11. That was always a good event to go to, but they took that away from Pukekohe and went to Hamilton instead. So we still had the 1 round then. But nice to see them getting it back. You would imagine, looking at the graphic that you showed there, it's going to be on what they're calling the Grand Prix circuit, which is the longest loop, the 3.33 kilometer racetrack. Nice and flowing, pretty quick. If anyone's played the Project Cars games, it is on that, certainly the early games in that series. So we will see with a track that we know before. Of course, the Formula Regional Oceania, which used to be called the Toyota Racing Series, goes there in January. So it is a track known to some of the guys in the series, like Will Brown, who's been in that championship, and others, and of course the New Zealand-based drivers in the series, like Richie Stanaway, Matt Payne, those kind of guys. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Great for the New Zealand fans who don't have to island hop to get to see their Supercars heroes at Taupo, which has of course had a tremendous attendance the last couple of years, this year and last, since it came back, since it came onto the calendar. So hoping that Ruapuna, which is near Christchurch, as you said, a good hub for people to come out to the racetrack and support it, because if, again, as always, if it doesn't get supported, it just goes away again if no one turns up to see the show.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly off the top of my head, Christchurch is the home of Scott McLaughlin, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. I believe he was from there. But yeah, real excited to see another round returning to New Zealand. I remember New Zealand dropped off the calendar. People were really concerned and wondering, is New Zealand going to have a place in Supercars for the foreseeable future? And we saw, just when they were just there at Taupo, I believe it was it last round or a few rounds ago, whenever they were. Whenever they were there, it was a couple of rounds ago they were there. People really showed out, packed all around the speedway, and then it was even special, to see a Kiwi himself, Matt Payne, winning the Jason Richards Memorial Trophy, and show that we need to be in New Zealand, we need to be racing in New Zealand in the Repco Supercars Championship, and to see Taupo's future secured is great, and then to add another round at Ruapuna Raceway, I think that's great as well. And as you mentioned, Project Cars too, Matt. I've played at this racetrack on that game. I actually played it last night. Dusted off Project Cars too. Just take the old Ford Falcon supercar for a spin around Ruapuna Raceway, and I really like the track. I think the supercars are going to get along pretty well around there, and I think it's so cool that they're going to be utilizing both the North Island and the South Island of New Zealand, and they didn't confirm like when these races would be taking place, but I assume it would be on back-to-back weekends, because it doesn't make any sense. Logistically, to let's say race in Taupo earlier in the year, then then freight the cars all the way back up to Australia, then take them right back down to New Zealand to the South Island. And plus, I don't really remember the last time we saw a supercars race weekend on back-to-back weekends. I would imagine that's been a very long time, or ever at all in its history. Do you know when was the last time that, or has that ever happened? And if you don't know, I'm sure Adam will know in the chat.
Yeah, it's been a long time, because sort of generally, well, apart from when we had 108 races in a row at Sydney Motorsport Park during COVID, at the end of that 2020 season. Let's hope that happens again. I don't remember the last time they ever had a back-to-back. I would imagine this would be one weekend, then a weekend off, and then the second meeting, probably at this time of year. They'd go to Taupo first, then do Ruapuna, and then probably double back to Tasmania, which was the last round a few weeks ago at Simmons Plains. I would imagine that's how it goes. So interesting, good to see they're adding that. There's all this talk about Singapore that's been happening over the last couple of years to support the Grand Prix there, whether that's still ongoing or not. But excellent to see that the core Australian New Zealand rounds are A, retained, and B, added to with this second New Zealand date.
Yeah, definitely. And Adam says it's nice to see 2 New Zealand rounds on the Supercars calendar. I'm sure the Kiwis on the Supercar grid are going to be extremely excited. That now they don't just have to, perform once for their hometown crowd. Now they can go out there and have 2 race weekends to do it. I think it'll be really exciting. Looking forward to seeing how Ruapuna Raceway performs next season. And Joe, talking about what you just talked about before we got into Supercars, man, saying you're bummed to hear that no one has went for the additional spot. In Mexico, I know Bob Pockets from Fox Sports reported today that no one has opted for, that open exemption provisional yet for the NASCAR race in Mexico City. A lot of us, thought maybe Sergio Checo Perez would potentially, be interested in doing that. I know it's getting kind of late now. Haven't heard any word on, whether he's going to be attending that event, in any way, whether it's just as a spectator or as a driver in the race. But yeah, I know a lot of us thought, we could potentially see him enter that event, but who knows? It seems like it's too late to me, but I feel like we would have heard an announcement by now, but who really knows? Because stranger things have happened. And before we get into our next story, I actually got some breaking news from the Raleigh News and Observer that came in. Yeah, as we all know, on Easter weekend, NASCAR raced at Rockingham Speedway to return to the Rock. And guess what has happened? The Raleigh News and Observer reporting that Rockingham Speedway is going to be up for sale now, and the owner of the track, Dan Lovenheim, it was actually the Charlotte Observer, excuse me, there. I said the Charlotte Observer has quotes from Dan Lovenheim. He says that we've basically taken it in first gear as far as we can go, building it out, getting it ready for bigger and better hands, and the time is right to pass the baton to someone who can take it further than we can. And he also added that the new buyer is going to be selected by July 1st. So the breaking news there, Rockingham Speedway has been sold, and the owner feel like he's done as much as he possibly can, given the revival of the track. And now we'll see it in new hands. We'll see what happens in the future at Rockingham Speedway. But got to give a credit to Dan Lovenheim and his group out there, for helping restore the track. And, because Easter weekend, it was a huge success.
Yeah, packed house, wasn't it? Especially for the Xfinity race. They had loads of people in on Friday as well for the practice sessions and stuff. So let's hope that someone goes in there and takes it forward and takes it on, much like we've seen with the revival of North Wilkesboro over the last couple of years. We can have Rockingham put, permanently back on the schedule, even if it is just for trucks and Xfinity going forward.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, Dan Lovenheim walked in. He hopes someone else that can take the track and run with it, build upon the success that they've had in this year's revival on the Easter race weekend. And now moving on, earlier in the evening before tonight's show, Dale Coyne Racing announced changes to its engineering department, following another disappointing showing during the month of May. Dale Coyne parted ways with engineers Ed Nathman and John Dick. Both Coyne cars didn't have much speed, with Renus VK and Jacob Abel in the last row shootout. VK made it in the race, then crashed out in the pits with no brakes, but Abel became the only driver to get bumped from the field of 33, and for the second consecutive year, a Coyne car missed out on the Indy 500. With the team struggling, Coyne decided to bring back some familiar faces to bolster its engineering department. Highly respected engineer Michael Cannon is back with Coyne to lead VK's number 18 team. Cannon previously worked at DCR for 6 years through 2009. He worked at DCR for 6 years from 2014 through 2019. And many in the IndyCar paddock think very highly of his talent. Meanwhile, the team's former engineering consultant, Mike Colliver, will return to engineer Abel's number 51 team. Colliver recently served as Ryan Hunter-Reay's engineer in the Indy 500, said he's worked with Abel before and thinks they have a lot to prove. While Cannon said he's always had respect for Dale Coyne and how he assembles his team, so he's happy to be back at DCR. VK thanked his old engineer Nathman for giving him a good car at Barber, and he's decided to work with Cannon, someone who he really respects. Photo taken by Chris Jones from Penske Entertainment. So, Matt, after another disappointing Indy 500 and month of May in general, or you could even say last few years for Dale Coyne Racing, do you think this team was due for an engineering overhaul, and can Michael Cannon help get them back on track?
Yeah, we talked a lot about them, didn't we, last year with all the driver changes and stuff going on. You would have thought with Renus VK coming in, it was a bit more of a solid base, but It's not really worked out, has it, through these first few races of the year? He's shown some flashes as VK, and he was going fairly well in the 500 at the weekend before he had the brake issue and the crash coming into pit lane. Jacob Abel getting bumped, I would have thought that's probably not so much of a surprise with what has been going on with that team throughout the year. But Cannon, as you said, is very well respected, and he's kind of been one of these sort of gurus of the lower half of the grid over the last few years. We've seen similar guys in Formula One over the last little while do a similar thing. So, went to Prema, it didn't work out there, and now finds himself back at his old stomping ground at DCR, as you said. So he'll know the setup to some degree. He'll know, I guess, some of the people there. Shouldn't take him too long to sneak back in. We'll see how much progress is made over these next couple of races. Of course, IndyCar straight back in action, of course, this Sunday, on the streets of Detroit. So we'll see if any progress can be made with VK. Adam says Marcus Smith to buy Rockingham. Why not? He's got the portfolio, Adam, behind him, hasn't he? Wouldn't mind, I'm sure, adding this one to the list. And Matthew posting the link there if you want to read that news that Kobe's just brought us about Rockingham Motor Speedway going up for sale. Thank you, Matthew. That is the link to that story. But obviously, click on the link after you finish watching the show.
Yeah, definitely. And I felt like that this was definitely a move Delcoin Racing needed to make because within the last 2 years, honestly, Matt, this team is almost unrecognizable of what they used to be, because they used to be one of the top underdogs in the series. Yeah, they didn't win all the time, but they would always go on some funky alternative strategy, and they didn't have the car, let's say, compared to like a Penske, a Ganassi, or an Andretti, but they had a car good enough. If they got in on the alt strategy, they could make something happen with it. It wouldn't always be a win, but maybe they could get on the podium, a top 5 or a top 10 finish. But it seemed like those Quinn cars, especially the 51 team, they just like been out at the zoo or something. They've just been really struggling, trying to make something happen. And Rinus VK show you how good of a driver he is. I think he's honestly been outperforming that number 18 car. I think he's really dragging that car to finishes that probably shouldn't be finishing. If you put another driver in that car, they probably wouldn't be able to do as well as Rinus VK has been doing. That's why I think when he's a free agent again next year, he's probably going to be one of the top drivers that the teams are going to be looking for in the 2026 IndyCar season. And as VK said, give credit to his old engineer at Nathman, for giving him a good car at Barber, because Rinus VK was one of the star performers at Barber on a day, it was difficult to pass. Rinus VK was making moves, and he was outperforming some of the bigger teams in IndyCar, really showing his value there. But even, with Rinus VK running really well, there's still a lot of struggles. So, Rinus always been an ECR car at Carpenter Racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, always quick. And this year, it was a big shock to him, because he's either, in the Firestone Fast 6 going for the pole, or at least making the Fast 12, and this year was in the last row shootout, a place he's not used to being at all. And we know Rinus VK didn't forget how to drive a car around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Fast. So to see him struggling, and both corn cars struggling, just mind-boggling, especially from the VK point of view. And I'm sure Del Coyne, is not happy to have one of his cars miss the show for the second consecutive years. Remember, Nolan Siegel crashed out, in the last row shootout, just trying to go for it, try to make the race, although the car just didn't have the speed. And then this year, Jacob Abel, just didn't have any speed at all. He was, quite a bit slower than his teammate, Rinus VK. And given the struggles of this Coyne team, I think that they needed to have an engineering overhaul. And for them to get someone like Michael Cannon, who we've talked about numerous times on this show, how people in the IndyCar paddock think he's one of the best engineering minds that there is in IndyCar. They felt like, that this is someone who can completely, turn someone's program around. And he's done it numerous times before. When he was at Ford, look what he did with Santino Ferrucci. The team had a record season last year. Well, they performed, the best we've seen from that Ford team in a very long time last season under the guidance of Michael Cannon. Then, we had a little strange stretch over the offseason. When he left Ford, he got signed to lead the Prima engineering department. And it was strange because they down here in Charlotte, North Carolina, they had their launch event. Michael Cannon was present at that launch event. And the very next week after this launch event, we're like, Michael Cannon has resigned from Prima, and he's not going to be with them anymore. Just a really strange stretch. And we're wondering who was going to win the race to sign Michael Cannon, and it looks like he's going to go to a place that he knows well in Delcoin Racing, and we'll see how quickly he can turn things around. But if I'm Renus VK, I have to feel extremely excited to have someone like Michael Cannon up on the timing stand for the rest of this season. And got a comment here from John in the chat said, has anyone said anything about Will Power's contract situation? The only thing I've seen about Will Power's contract situation, John, is the fact that, that heading into the Indy 500, they're like, we're going to push off to the side for now. We're going to focus on Indy. And then once, Indy is done and dusted like it is now, they were going to revisit those contract talks. But, Will Power, Team Penske hoping to stay together. But we've seen stranger things happen. We know, since the start of the season, people have been saying that, David Malukas is the top driver to potentially replace Will Power in that number 12 Verizon Chevrolet. But, the Ford team after Michael Cannon left, they really struggled to start off this season. Definitely a step down in performance compared to where they were last year. And as David Malukas and that number 4 team continued to struggle, we were wondering like what's going to happen. We're like, oh, maybe, Power will stay after all, because with Malukas struggling, those rumors kind of quieted down. But, then flash forward to the Indy 500, little Dave got a podium at Indy, and he just didn't get a podium. He got a runner-up finish, and he ran strong all race long, ran in the top 10 all throughout the race. Then towards the end, moved into the top 5, and at one point it looked like he might be a contender to win the Indy 500. Just a really good month of May for David Malukas, because last year at this time, we talked about it on the wrap-up show. He was recovering from an injury and surgery, and he was making content for the IndyCar social media team last month of May. And look at him now; he was one position away from winning the biggest race in the world. And given how David Malukas performed in the Indy 500, and seeing how Will Power was absolutely nowhere on Sunday, like you never really heard his name come up once. He was, we all know it was going to be tough for Will Power coming from the last row, starting dead last on the grid. And, it just showed how difficult it was to pass on Sunday, because Will Power could not do anything at all to make any sort of noise during this race. And with Will Power being non-existent at the Indy and David Malukas showing up and showing out, maybe we'll see those rumors start to reignite again, Matt, with Malukas potentially becoming the newest Team Penske driver.
Yeah, I think when we heard that Malukas was coming back to this team at the end of last year, I think I made mention on this show, he's in prime position to take the 12 slot if they don't renew with Will. And you just have to look at the race at the weekend. Yes, Will and Joseph both started at the back after, of course, the penalties and whatnot that we talked about all throughout the weekend and last week. But Newgarden was coming all the way through during that race. By halfway, he was just outside the top 10, whereas Will was still struggling down in the 20s. And as you said, he was barely mentioned on TV all day. Whereas the young kid in the affiliated team ends up on the podium, as you said, after missing the race last year. So going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Back to the Cannon thing quickly before we move on. This could reignite Dale Coyne back to the glory days when they had Justin Wilson in that team for them. Now they've got VK. We know how good of a driver he is. Now he's got a really good stout engineer behind him that could really put the rocket up Coyne to get them back to where they were, 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Looking forward to seeing what Dale Coyne Racing can do with Michael Cannon, leading the engineering department for the rest of the season. And if you had to find someone who's a free agent and available, you can't go wrong with picking someone like Michael Cannon, because he was definitely the top free agent engineer available. And we'll see how quickly he can work his engineering magic. And one last thing before we move on, well, we're actually going to talk a little bit about Team Penske in just a little bit, but with Will Power, it's going to be interesting to see, how he performs this weekend in Detroit. This is an event put on by Penske Entertainment. This is Roger Penske events, that he promotes himself. He's really proud of the street race in Detroit, especially in the downtown area of Detroit. That's a track Team Penske will want to do well. But after, Detroit, guess what's coming up right around the corner? You got Gateway coming up, and who usually runs extremely well at Gateway? David Malukas. So if David Malukas goes to Gateway and he's in the top 5 and contending for the win, Will Power doesn't have a good Detroit or struggles at Gateway, you're going to see those rumors get louder and louder and louder. So I actually think that there's going to be quite a little bit of pressure on Will Power these next 2 IndyCar race weekends coming up.
Yeah, well done on John for bringing that up. We'll keep an eye on how that develops over the next couple of weeks, because as you said, Malukas' best track at Gateway coming up in a few weeks' time. So yeah, going to be a very interesting story to follow.
Yeah, yeah, and if the AJ Foyt racing cars perform as well as they did at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at Gateway, maybe David Malukas might be someone's early pick a winner for that event, because I believe at one point in his career he is going to win Gateway one time, at least once. Yeah, so looking forward to that, because that race is actually going to be shown on prime time on Father's Day night on Fox. Real exciting opportunity for IndyCar to race on a Sunday night under the lights in Madison, Illinois. And now sticking with IndyCar, after Team Penske dominated the headlines last week for all the wrong reasons, IndyCar avoided a nightmare scenario after the Indianapolis 500. With 14 laps to go, Alex Palou made a late dive bomb move on Marcus Ericsson entering turn one, which ended up being the race-winning move. If Palou didn't get by Ericsson, we might be talking about an Indy 500 winner who got disqualified tonight because Ericsson lost his second place finish after failing post-race technical inspection. His Andretti Global teammate Kyle Kirkwood and Prima Racing's Callum Milot also failed inspection. IndyCar officials discovered that Ericsson and Kirkwood's cars had modifications to the Dallara supplied energy management system, also known as EMS, covers and covered to A-arm mounting points with unapproved spacers and parts. According to IndyCar, EMS covers must be used as supplied, and the Andretti modifications provided an advantage and enhance aerodynamic efficiency. Meanwhile, ILOT's front wing assembly failed to meet the minimum end plate height and location specification, and as a result, the numbers 27, 28, and 90 cars were moved to the rear of the field, with Ericsson's final result being 31st, 32nd for Kyle Kirkwood and Callum Milot in 33rd. Prize money and championship points were also changed to reflect the revised results, and all the teams were fined $100,000, and the team/competition manager were suspended for this weekend's IndyCar race in Detroit. Photo taken by Jeff Hilliker from Penske Entertainment. And here's two statements from the team. Andretti Global said, "We are in receipt of the Indy 500 of the Indianapolis 500 post-race penalty notice as provided by IndyCar. We are taking the necessary time to assess the information, and we will be requesting a full review with IndyCar." And then Prima said, following the Indy 500, the number 90 Prima car, driven home in P12 by Callum Milot, was found in breach of the technical regulations due to the front wing end plate not meeting the minimum height. As a consequence, the team was disqualified from the race and received accessory sanctions. While the same wing was completely original, successfully passed TAT multiple times throughout the month, and the issue didn't lead to any performance gain. The car ended up being non-compliant with the rules at the end of the race, so the team accepts full responsibility. The team is currently investigating the root of the problem, which can involve incidents and fitment or production issues. We look forward to implementing the needed procedures to ensure improved control and avoid these kinds of situations in the future. So, Matt, given the seriousness of what happened last week with Team Penske, how shocked were you to hear about these penalties and how close IndyCar came to a disqualified race winner? That would have been, a complete and total, utter PR nightmare for IndyCar.
Oh, that would have been the worst thing to happen for a very, very long time if Ericsson had fended off Palou or even retaken him in those late laps to get the victory and then have the car thrown out afterwards. Would have been awful. As we were talking about before we went on the air, if Alex Palou's doing the media round as the race winner on Monday and then finds out, or if it was Marcus Ericsson was doing that said media round and then finds out he's been kicked, then that would have been, the absolute nightmare of all nightmares for Roger Penske and the IndyCar Series. After all the talk about cheating and inspection issues and whatnot last week after the qualifying debacle, really bad. Maybe we turned a corner now with this. Maybe this is the beginning of people pointing fingers at the officials pointing fingers at the teams a bit more strongly and saying you can't do that stuff that they may have perhaps snuck under the radar a little bit in previous race weekends or years at the 500, are now going to get picked up on. Maybe we'll see some more at Detroit at the weekend. Going to be interesting to see how that pans out going forward. But for them to have just avoided Ericsson having the win and then being booted, they have to thank Alex Palou for that pass that he made with the laps running down on Sunday.
Yeah, it turned out to be a good thing that Alex Palou ended up passing him, because tonight, we'd be having a completely different conversation. Yeah, I was quite surprised to see what had happened here, because I honestly didn't expect to see any sort of disqualifications from the Indianapolis 500, because usually, you don't see any DQs happening from this
No.
race. Yeah, I don't remember the last time we had a disqualification from the race, and then to see the two Andretti's and then the Prima get disqualified. Now, given what we've been talking about for the last week on all across our shows, involving Penske, Newgard and Power and all of the stuff surrounding that, and then conflicts of interest as well. Yeah, definitely did not, like that we had this post race disqualifications, but I hope that, like you're saying, that we could be coming to the end of, all coming to the end of this saga, so we can move forward, and maybe when we get to Detroit this coming weekend, the race weekends afterward, we won't have to be thinking about, conflicts of interest, penalties and all of that. But all in all, really happy that we avoided that dreaded scenarios we've been talking about of a disqualified Indy 500 race winners. So Alex Palou, just hours after winning his first Indy 500, he went to the Indiana Pacers game in downtown Indianapolis for Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah, so and they also introduced him. Got to go on the we got to go on the court, wearing the traditional Indy 500 wreath around his body and all of that. Then he was also doing media appearances as well. He's been, doing them all throughout the week so far. Yeah, could you imagine on a Monday afternoon, you're on a talk show and all of that, and then you get the news that you've been disqualified from the race, and then it becomes an extremely awkward situation. So very lucky we avoided, a kind of awkward situation right there. And in the chat, Joe says a credit to Erickson, Kirkwood, and Isla for still attending the Monday night Indy 500 victory celebration after being disqualified. Absolutely. Thought it was a real good thing to see those guys, show up, and answer the tough questions, and, just be honest, with how they were feeling about it. I know Doug Bowles, the IndyCar president, gave them the option, to avoid the banquet given what's happened, but they all decided to, that, hey, it sucks what happened to us at the end of the day, but we're still going to show up, answer those tough questions, and be present for this special occasion. So really glad to see all of them showing up despite, being a real frustrating end of the month of May for them, especially, Marcus Ericsson, because he was so close to victory and has been a rough go at it during his tenure at Andretti. And he finally put together his signature race as an Andretti Global driver, and then had it all taken away from him. And also in the point standings, and Ericsson took a massive hit as well when the results were unofficial. Ericsson was 10th in points, and with the disqualification, guess where he's gone now? He's dropped from 10th to 20th. So not looking good right now for Marcus Ericsson in the point standings. We'll see if he'll be able to bounce back as we get deeper into this IndyCar season. And taking one final look at the Indy 500 before we finally put this race to bed, Alex Palou has responded to questions about his IndyCar future and the talk about his dominance, opening doors for Formula One again and across all our great network shows. We've talked about Palou's historical season of dominance with 5 wins now in the first 6 races of the 2025 season, something we haven't seen since A.J. Foyt in the 1960s. Palou is a 3-time NTT IndyCar Series champion, and unless he gets injured or suffers a historic collapse, he's well on his way to a 4th IndyCar title. And I know I said it on the wrap-up show, and Ben said it on the Encore show, among others, wondering if Palou might get a serious look from F1 teams. Palou previously served as a reserve driver for McLaren F1 before the legal drama involving McLaren. Chip Ganassi Racing himself left a stain on his image in F1 circles, and in an interview with Nathan Brown from the Indy Star, the newly crowned champion of the 109th Indy 500 said F1 isn't calling him anymore, and noted how the culture is different over there compared to IndyCar. He mentioned how you don't see people celebrate with their wives and kids as much as they do in any car, or hanging out in the bus lot and having dinner with the mechanics. And for anyone worrying about Palou leaving IndyCar for F1 anytime soon, he says he doesn't want to leave now and wants to get another Indy 500 win. And our own Jackson Lambros brought up how Brendan Hartley made the wrong choice by turning down a Ganassi seat and going to F1 instead. Link to this interview in the video description below, and photo taken by Joe Skabinski from Penske Entertainment. Matt, how reassuring is it for IndyCar to hear that Palou has strong feelings about staying in the series long term?
Well, for the series and the people that run the series, it's great for them to keep one of their stars. This series is, of course, with Villeneuve, Zanardi, Montoya, those kind of names going off to F1. I listened to last week's F1 Beyond the Grid podcast, which was with Dario Franchitti. Listened to that today, and he was talking about all his opportunities he had to go to Formula One. Could you imagine if Dario had joined Jaguar at the beginning of the 2000s and not had all those Indy 500 wins and championships? He was kind of the last like dominant guy of that kind of era, wasn't it? From where he could have not had any of that. And then Palou has said, he wants to stay and win a couple more Indy 500s and a few more championships and cement his legacy in the States rather than go and run for 15th place in Formula One, which if he was to join a midfield team, an Aston Martin, an Alpine, he's not going to join Racing Bulls, is he? But you know what I mean, that kind of a team, then, that's kind of the end of his, career. We've seen how people go to F1, don't perform and get chucked out to dry and find themselves probably in sports cars or something like that. 1.16 is his average finish for the season so far this year. It's absolutely incredible what he's done. And it's Alex Palou's world and we're just living in it.
Yeah, and it looks like we're going to be living in a Palou world for the foreseeable future. And you mentioned how some people go to F1 and get spit out. We saw Brendan Hartley, as Jackson mentioned in one of our private chats. Well, Brendan, he was a rising star, in sports car racing for quite a while before he got that opportunity to drive for the team, now known as Racing Bulls. Yeah, Brendan, starred in sports cars, and it was surprising, that when Red Bull called him back up, because he was previously a Red Bull junior driver, then got dropped and started to have a great career in sports cars, and then got the F1 opportunity. And it was actually reported that he had signed, with Chip Ganassi Racing to ironically drive that number 10 car at the time. But, there was a clause in the IndyCar contract, which was smart on Brendan's end if he wanted the option. It was the fact if an F1 team come calling, he could easily, get out of that contract. And, Red Bull wanted to bring him back, put him in that Toro Rosso seat at the time. And then, Brendan had his go in F1, did not go well, and then ended up back in sports cars. Now, been with Toyota Gazoo Racing and, still, at the top of his game in sports cars. But yeah, it can go horribly wrong. And for Alex Palou, given the historic season that he's having right now and that the team he's with, if he were to leave for Formula One, like there's no guarantee, that if he were to, let's say, come back maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now in IndyCar, if he there's no guarantee that he'd be at the same level. And the number 10 team right now, that's a special group. And I think you need to do everything you can to keep that group together for as long as you can, because they have all the right people in the right places and everything is clicking, at every single possible angle, even the smallest details, it's just going right to a T. And I think if you keep this group together, for as long as you can, Alex Palou's dominant run, can continue. He can potentially become the Jimmy Johnson of IndyCar, where he could win, a lot more championships, maybe multiple, maybe could, go on a run, maybe win 2, 3, 4, or even, 5 championships in a row. I would be shocked to see that in IndyCar, but sky's the limit for Palou and this number 10 team. And I think that he's making the right decision, being like, hey, I want to stay in IndyCar. I want to make this my home, because right now, given how strong he's running, he could potentially end up being one of the all-time great drivers in the history of the IndyCar series. Could be right at there on Mount Rushmore with the great Mario Andretti and AJ Foyt as one of the best we have ever seen. So I think that it's the right call for him to stay in IndyCar with Chip Ganassi Racing, because things are going all so well. I just wonder how different his future would be if he'd ended up driving for the McLaren team in IndyCar. I have a feeling he wouldn't be seeing this same type of success, because Ganassi and Palou, the number 10 team, Barry Wanzer, his strategists, it seemed like it's just all aligning there for a great run. And Adam in the chat says Alex Palou also threw out the first pitch at the New York Mets game as well. Yes, I believe I saw that on the socials last night, and also got to visit the Empire State Building and go to the very top as well, which is tradition for the Indy 500 winner. And then Joe says F1 is not promising. Really, maybe only if Red Bull loses Max and after Hamilton leaves Ferrari, but if not a top ride, you don't see it worth it. Yeah, I know some people, even I know Ben said that, wonder if Cadillac will take a look at him, since the American audience is familiar with Alex Palou, if you're not going to get a so-called American driver. But, Cadillac's going to be a new team in F1, no guarantee in how they're going to perform. I assume they would probably be running 21st and 22nd, given the fact that it's a new team. But is it really worth leaving IndyCar, where you're the top dog, best? You're driving for one of the best car owners, best team out on the grid, and like, would you really rather, go to Formula One where you're running dead last and don't finish in the points at all throughout the year, more than likely, versus, going out there being the guy that everyone's gonna be chasing every race weekend?
Yeah, we had the same discussion in the USRN chat this week about Cadillac. That's if he's going to go, that's probably his last chance. But he seems to have waved it off. I said post race on our call of the race on USRN. You think back to when Dario got injured and had to leave the 10 team. There was that cycle through of drivers they had trying to find the guy to replace Dario. We had Ed Jones in there, Felix Rosenquist, perhaps Brendan Hartley, as you talked about, coming. It didn't happen. Now they've got their guy with Palou, and look what's happened. They've just gone absolutely from strength to strength. And it's going to be up to the other teams to try and stop them. In a spec series, you shouldn't really have someone doing this kind of thing this regularly. So again, now we're out of the 500. We'll see what happens for the rest of the season. But he's already further ahead of second in the championship standings than second is ahead of 10th. So there's a lot of catching up for the rest of the field to do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think I saw something yesterday on social media, with the updated points showing that the same distance, Alex Palou is over to Pato O'Ward in second. Pato O'Ward is the same amount, is the same distance ahead of his teammate Nolan Siegel, who's like way down in the point standing. So it just shows you how dominant Alex Palou is. Just been totally incredible to see what this guy is doing. And the rest of the field, I'm sure they're not going to be happy to see that he's going to be staying in IndyCar long term, because they're going to have to try to beat this guy in Mad. I never thought I'd ever see the day when we would see someone at Chip Ganassi Racing, become the number one driver, not named Scott Dixon, while he's still in the sport. I thought Scott Dixon was going to be the number one driver forever until he decided to retire. But now I think Scott Dixon, he's still competing at a high level, but I think it's safe to say Alex Palou is the number one driver of that team, and Scott Dixon is kind of, slipped back to number two, and like this veteran mentorship like role, because this is Alex Palou's team anymore. It's no longer Scott Dixon's team.
Yeah, and we saw a little bit, didn't we, on the race on Sunday? We saw the Andretti curse rear its head again with Marco having his crash on the first lap. And then the Scott Dixon's unlucky streak at the 500 continue with the brake issue, which ruled them out for the day. So another disappointment in May for Dixon, whereas yet again, here goes his teammate off and wins the race. This time it was the 500. So, yeah, you're right. It looked like it was going to be Dixon's team forever, but they found their number A+ replacement, haven't they? Or team leader now with Alex Palou.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good spot to put the bow on the Indy 500 once and for all. And so, Matt, it's time for our grid EPI update for this week.
Indeed, here is what's happened in the Grid Endurance Performance Index, the second busiest weekend in terms of race numbers through the year, 9 point scoring races over the weekend. We'll start in Germany, where most of it was happening. 2 races at the Nürburgring at the weekend on the Nordschleife, the 2 qualifying races for next month's 24-hour race. Both of them won by that car there on screen for the Scherer Porsche team. 2 4-hour races they were across the weekend, and Lawrence Vanfor, early leader of the Grid EPI this year, and Patrick Niederhauser, his partner in crime at the weekend, winning both on Saturday and on Sunday. The DTM was at the Lausitz Ring, IndyCar reference from what we were just talking about. They were at the Lausitz Ring at the weekend. Lucas Auer there in the 22 Mercedes getting the victory on Saturday, and then Lamborghini getting a win on Sunday. Jack Aitken, he of the IMSA paddock, out dueling Rene Rast on Sunday to take the win. The ADAC GT Masters got its season underway, the final championship in the EPI to get going this season. They were also at the Lausitz Ring at the weekend, and both races won by Leo Pischer and Simon Birch, no relation to our Josh, in their Porsche. They were the winners of both races. There you go. The race on Sunday morning was a wet one, and they came home in both. Outside of Germany, in Italy at Misano, the latest round of the Michelin Creventic Series took place, and it was won by Haas RT, not Haas F1, but Haas RT, the Barbadian team. Peter Jelenix, Jeff McIlls, and Métis Lismont getting the victory over 12 hours across the weekend for the Audi R8 on screen. And on Monday, it wasn't just a bank holiday in the States for Memorial Day, it was also a bank holiday here in the UK at the weekend. And at Alton Park, British GT had 2 sprint races over the weekend. Rob Collard and Hugo Cook winning in that Lamborghini in race 1. and Kevin C and Maxi Gertz getting the win in race number 2 in their Mercedes there. Let's have a look at the updated points standings. There has been some shuffling going along through the weekend, but still Felipe Nasr and Nick Tandy are tied at the top. IMSA back in action this weekend at Detroit, of course, supporting the IndyCar race. Lawrence Vanford popped himself back up into 5th with the guy he shared the car with at the weekend, Patrick Niederhauser, in 6th position there. The real only big changes inside the top 10 through week 9 of the Grid Endurance Performance Index. Another busy week coming up this weekend as we take a look at the top 50. This weekend we have IMSA in Detroit, as I mentioned, and plenty of GT World Challenge action going on. The Asian Championship is in Thailand at Buriram. The Australian Championship is at Queensland Raceway, 2 races each for those. And the European Endurance Cup touches down at Monza for their second round of the season. And we saw a shock win at Monza last year with the BMW for WRT getting the victory from the bronze class. So it could be an interesting one on Sunday at the Temple of Speed in Monza. All those races will have the winners and the pictures for you on the show next week for week 10 of the Grid Endurance Performance Index. Back to Kobe now. More headlines from the week.
Thanks, Matt. Time for some more motorsports news from around the world. Hendrick Motorsports signed William Byron to a 4-year contract extension through the 2029 NASCAR Cup Series season. Now 27 years old, Byron has won 14 Cup races, made the playoffs for 6 consecutive years, and won the last 2 Daytona 500s. Team owner Rick Hendrick said Byron is the real deal, praising his natural ability as a driver, impressive work ethic, and high character as a person. Byron said they've built something special with the number 24 team led by crew chief Rudy Fugle, and he's thankful to continue working with an amazing group of people, graphic courtesy of Hendrick Motorsports. Richard Childress Racing and Kyle Busch have agreed to a 1-year contract extension to keep him in the number 8 Chevrolet through the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Since joining RCR in 2023 up to this point, Busch has won 3 Cup races and earned 16 top 5s and 31 top 10s. All 3 of his wins with the team came in 2023 at Fontana, Talladega, and Gateway. For the first time in his full-time Cup Series career, Busch went winless in 2024, and we're closing in on 2 full calendar years since his last Cup win on June 4th, 2023 at Gateway, and it's almost June 4th, 2025 in just a few days' time. Busch said his chapter at RCR isn't complete yet and feels like they're in the process of building some special, graphic courtesy of Richard Childress Racing. Daniel Suarez will pull double duty during his home race weekend next month in Mexico City. Suarez will drive the number 9 Chevrolet for Junior Motorsports in the Xfinity Series race at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez with sponsorship from Quaker State. And this was originally a race scheduled for Shane Van Gisbergen when Junior Motorsports announced races for him and Ross Chastain in his number 9 car, but SVG no longer in the car for Mexico. But from a business perspective, probably a better idea to have, hometown guy Daniel Suarez in the car pulling double duty. And the Xfinity Series previously raced in Mexico City from 2005 through 2008. Been a native of Monterrey, Mexico. Getting a chance to race twice at home means a lot to him. Suarez said he left Mexico for America in 2011 to chase his NASCAR dreams, and he's always dreamed about racing in his home country and believes Mexican race fans are becoming more interested in NASCAR. Graphic courtesy of Junior Motorsports. Trackhouse Racing MotoGP rider Ayogura had surgery after suffering an injury in a Turn 2 crash in last Friday's practice session for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, and due to the injury, Agura missed both the Sprint Racing Grand Prix events in the United Kingdom. And as you can see right here on the screen from Trackhouse, it reads, Ayogura underwent a successful keyhole surgery procedure to repair a fracture to the top of his right tibia just below the knee, and an MRI scan carried out on Monday revealed that a small bone fragment was also displaced, and this was removed during the 30-minute surgery. Post-operative evaluation revealed a successful outcome, and now he has commenced rehabilitation. Based on the outcome of the surgery and medical report from Tuesday, the team are hopeful that I will be fit to ride at the Grand Prix of Aragon in just over 1 week, but his progress will be monitored, and the team is offering all assistance ahead of further fitness evaluation closer to the start of the weekend in Aragon there. And also got a statement from, if I can find it down here on the screen, from Al Ghur as well. He said the surgery is done. I think everything went quite well. I feel okay. I feel pretty okay with my knee. I just needed a bit of time to get back to 100% fitness. It's quite difficult, and we will see if I can make it to Oregon. I'm trying to do what I can to recover my leg, as in situations like these, you can't do too much. I will just do what I can and prepare for the next race weekend. And on a separate note, I hope he doesn't be like Jorge Martin and come back too soon and end up with a more serious injury and miss even more time. So hopefully he'll be listening to the doctors and taking care of himself in that instance. And we also had another MotoGP rider suffering an injury. This time it was Honda's Luca Marini. He suffered a heavy crash in testing for the Suzuka 8-hour after flying from the United Kingdom to Japan. And following the crash, Marini suffered a dislocated left hip, ligament damage in his left knee, fractures in his sternum and left collarbone, including a right-sided pneumothorax. Marini will remain in Japan until he's deemed fit to travel, and Honda will support him during his recovery. Photo courtesy of Honda. And last but not least, NASCAR Xfinity Series driver Jesse Love will spend his off weekend soon by competing in Mazda MX-5 Cup at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course on June 6th through 8th. Love will join BSI Racing and drive the number 2 Mazda MX-5 Cup car with sponsorship from Whelen Engineering, Everyday Champion, to celebrate local heroes who work hard to make their communities better and safer places to live. Love said he's thrilled to be representing Whelan's Everyday Champion initiative and compete in Mazda MX-5 Cup at Mid-Ohio. Team owner Shea Holbrook said Love is a household name in the NASCAR world, which makes it a treat when one of those guys come over to drive one of her cars. Photo courtesy of the series. And before we get into pick a winner here, Matt got a comment here in the chat room from Matthew Owens. Good to see you, Matthew. Said it goes to show how upside down the F1 world is. If you don't think Alex Palou belongs in F1 and can contend there almost immediately, you're not watching the same driver that I am. Yeah, Matthew, if all 20 cars on the grid were completely equal, I have no doubt that Alex Palou would be able to go out there, and be one of the top drivers in Formula One. But that's not the world we live in F1. But if it were all equal cars, I definitely like Alex Palou's chances to go out there and be competitive against some of the best in the world. And Matt, before we get into our pick a winner here, we have one of our regulars on the air tonight. Happy he got his technical issues resolved. Hello to our own Joshua Birch. How are you doing tonight, Josh?
Have you ever, as a child, put 2 paper cups together and connected it with a piece of string and talked through the other end? That's basically what my internet connection is right now. In order to be on the air tonight. I do apologise I'm so late to the show. Thanks, guys, for filling in and also waiting, but I've completely lost signal. And now, hopefully, it's a bit patchy, but I'm here. Hello. Great show. What have I missed?
Plenty of IndyCar chat, to be honest, but we can pick up on that in a moment when we get to Hots and Knots, which we weren't going to do. But as you're here now, we can. Joe says the internet couldn't keep you off the air.
So what's happened to my hand? Trying to get it fixed. I've sliced it, so not great. But yeah, a bit of a boo-boo.
Let's do pick a winner then before we do Hots and Knots as per tradition. And there is the standings, and it's close again at the top. We are 5 points separating the top 5. Going into yet another busy weekend, and we are going to do 2 picks now, or at least attempt to. And you can, by using the hashtag pick a winner across all social media across the weekend, in what again is another busy weekend. We are going to start our picks for this evening with the first race of the weekend for Formula E at Shanghai, their second visit to the Formula One track. Of course, they used the slightly shorter version of said layout. I did last year for the first time, and they're back there again after the Tokyo races a couple of weeks ago. I'm well behind with Formula E, so I'm just going to keep sticking with the championship winner. Ollie Rowland will be my pick for Saturday to bring Nissan home on Chinese soil. Kobe, who are you going with?
Well, I think I'm probably going to stick with the same Oliver Rowland, because we haven't seen practice and qualifying yet. But depending on how that goes, if Oliver Rowland doesn't have a good starting spot, may change my pick. But right now, I'm rolling with Oliver Rowland. Who you have, Josh?
3 for 3. Ollie Rowland is in the form of his life right now, and Nissan are the team to beat. Jaguar have fallen off. Now we know that Nick Cassidy is also leaving at the end of the season. It looks like Mitch Evans might also be on the way out, so they're looking for 2 new top runners. Don't count out Dan Tickton, though. He's coming into his own. So I will go for Ollie Rowland, but depending on how practice goes, because you can change up until the green flag or lights out, I might also put a reserve pick in for Dan Tipton.
Yeah, interesting. 2 races across the weekend, of course, for Formula E at Shanghai. Also, of course, to pick for you guys at home on the weekend, the Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona, IndyCar at Detroit, as we've talked about a lot on the show tonight, and Nashville Cup Series. We are also going to pick right now, Saturday, we have IMSA in play for pick a winner this season again, and they are back on the streets of Detroit supporting the IndyCar race. And I am going to go, I don't think Porsche will win. They've won everything so far in IMSA, but I feel like their time is up, and I'm going to go for the 25 BMW is my pick to win the race on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it seems like BMW has been like the best of the rest, right? When compared to Porsche lately, and I also don't think Porsche is going to win as well. I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but IMSA has decided, to go in and issue a manual BOP adjustment to pad the Porsches back even more, because I guess they don't like to see the Porsche stinking up the show at the top of the GTP field. So I actually think I'm going to see one of the Acuras win. Give me the number 93 Acura, Nick Yellowly, and Ringer van der Zande. Who you got for Detroit, Josh?
Well, I've all my pick a winner points so far this year have mainly come from picking the number 7 Porsche, but BMW have looked strong. But I quite like Cadillac with V-Line Engineering in the 31. So I think I'm going to go with Cadillac as a wild entry on this one. It's their type of circuit where they can't compete on pace, so a tight, twisty circuit where they can qualify well might work and might suit them better. So yeah, I'll go with the V-Line Engineering 31.
Like your logic. Use the hashtag pick a winner across all of the Grid Network TV, social media across the weekend. Joe's going with Ollie Rowland as well, with the rest of us for Saturday's FE race, as is John. So you can get your name on the board if you're not already. There's 130 plus races still available to pick from between now and the end of the F1 season. I think the last race is F1 Abu Dhabi. Dan was a big surprise last weekend in Tokyo, says Joe. So Josh might be on something there. Adam is going with Ollie Rowland as well, and he's also going with you with the 31 wheeling car for IMSA on Saturday, as is John. So plenty of people jumping on the wheeling car. Joe is going with the Porsche number 6. You can get your picks in the comment section of this video or on social media. I didn't forget about F1, John. It's the Barcelona Spanish Grand Prix at the weekend, the third of the triple header, this European triple header. Josh has joined just in time for Hots and Knots, which we said we were going to scrap. And there's plenty to dissect, which is good because I've got lots of things on my mind.
Good.
You start as you're running late but sounding great. You can start.
Thank you very much. Great Monaco Grand Prix. I hate to say people have been going, oh, it didn't work. Oh, it didn't. No, it could be better. And I still say that in order to make F1 a bit more exciting, we should mandate using all 3 tire compounds in a race, not just having the 2-stop strategy.
So
but for a while. It just makes more sense. But for what it was, the softest tires available, mandating 2 stops, it promoted a result at the end where we had 3 cars who could mathematically go in for the win. And that is better. That's progress at Monaco. What we now need to do is what actually Alex Wurz suggested and try and modify the circuit. Now, I quite like the idea that's also been floated about, ironically enough, of going instead of right at Portier, left at Portier, and creating a hairpin to create a bigger run down towards Nouvelle Chicane, but then adding that to what has gone in with Alex Wurz and changing Nouvelle so it's a bit later on to give it a bit of a braking zone. All his ideas work and will actually provide a bit better racing. And I think we all now need to agree it's not really the track, is it? It's the cars. Formula E have given us great racing. So now we're down these cars.
And of course, we are doing that next year with the new cars. Nouvelle Chicane to be changed potentially. They were going to change the apex of the Lowe's hairpin and Rascasse. They've reprofiling Rascasse as well to make that more of a overtaking spot again. Yes, I mean, the technology's there. We've seen them do it before about bringing land back from the sea, if that makes sense, to to do stuff at Monaco. They've done it before, so there's no real reason we can't do it again. I think you're right. Well, you're right in some respects. The race at the front was a a typical Monaco race, apart from that they had 2 pit stops. All of the stuff going on in the back half of the field was an absolute farce.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
Yeah, just crazy. George Russell giving his best Jose Mourinho, I prefer not to speak, was funny. The hot of the weekend from Monaco for me is Hadjar.
Yeah, what a
remember
race.
when we had all that Red Bull chat at the beginning of the season about Lawson being switched out for Yuki and whatnot? No one was talking about Hadjar outside of Max Verstappen, who is either on the podium or not, and which means he's going to be on the podium again this weekend because he's on a knot from the weekend before. Goes all the way back to my Cota last year. On, off, all the way through. So he's going to get on the podium this week. Hadjar's been the best Red Bull driver of the other 3 by a long, long way this season. I thought he was tremendous at the weekend.
He's only driving to double points, if I'm not mistaken, as well, of the juniors. And I think it's going something where everyone wrote Hadjar off after Australia, and then he's gone, right, there, I'm back. This is what I can do. Yeah. And he's showing us. I spoke to LA Wilshaw, who's from Road to F1, who's joined the team. And she was saying about how last year Isaac gave off the energy of he was the big kid, at school, and he was the big bully. He was mouthing off and everything in F2. And he's coming to F1 this year, and he's like a little Care Bear, walking around with a big smile on his face as well. And he's gone from being the big bully year 6 to the little innocent year 7. And he's got a mouth on him as well. And he's showing his talent. Finally, Hadjar sort of arrived in what he should be. I have got a knot, and I'll wait to say it because it's quite good.
Okay.
Other hot. I quite like. I agree with Joe saying it. Amazon.
Yes.
What a coverage! I was loving it.
Watched it this evening. I'm catching up. I didn't watch the post race. Joe said the post race was great. But yeah, what a breath of fresh air it was. And something different.
And it worked. It all worked. I thought putting up Adam Alexander in the booth for both the Xfinity and the Cup would be a bit repetitive. But he's found ways to make it different. And it was working. And having Dale in there as well, and now learning more about Dale's broadcasting background from that podcast he did with Rick Allen. If you haven't listened to it, I implore you go to. Because he said he doesn't want to be lead play-by-play. He's done that. He's seen how much work goes into it. He doesn't want to do that. He's happy with what he's doing. And I think the booze dynamic sort of works. I was really worried it wouldn't. So I'm quite happy about that. And I'm excited to see when TNT take over, because it's the same booth, but we bring in new people. Larry McReynolds coming in, working with Dale Jr. as well. And I'm really excited to see that there was a bit of a refresh and the change around. But the one big thing I'd say from Prime is the differences that American viewers saw in terms of ad breaks. Yes, of course, Prime had ad breaks, but they went in side by side, I think 10 times more. I think they did side by side 19 times during the race compared to Fox, who only did it 3 in the year before. And in terms of the actual ad break time, Fox had 2 hours of ad breaks in the race, whereas Prime, in terms of full screen, only had 45 minutes. So huge improvement. And people were kicking and screaming, but it worked. And also, I'm sure Matt might have mentioned this as well to you, Matt, the Oracle. The views of the other shows just go up and up and up. The YouTube stream that we were doing as well, at the end, the last 10 laps, up and 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 up, straight up, wanting to see the end of the race. So there's still people that aren't on Prime that I think need to get on Prime, because it is so good.
Get a free trial and watch all of the races, which cover the Prime segment. So, of course, we've got the bracket challenge beginning this week at Nashville. Coverage was great. I'm a big Adam Alexander guy, have been for a while. He was excellent. The race was very good. Byron versus Hamlin for pretty much the bulk of it, until it fell apart for kind of both of them at the end, with Chastain sweeping through to win. You're right about the ads, and I'll say this again. I said this last week. or somewhere. I said they don't need Prime. Do not need to go to adverts because it's not a television channel. But because people are giving them money to show them, they will, and they've worked out a way of doing it with the side by side, and they had difficult to see from my viewing of it from YouTube from Prime, if that makes sense, when they went to full sprint brakes, but that looked like it was either under cautions and when they had obviously the stoppage in the middle for the Memorial Day celebrations. Ross Chastain, the most impressive driver of the NASCAR season. He's doing a very, very good job in that Trackhouse team. Race was great. The tower was working. More on that in a minute.
Yeah.
More on that in a minute from the other side. That worked. Commentators were great. Coverage was really good. Much, just as I said, a breath of fresh air from what we've been used to all these years with Fox and with NBC to some degree.
I think NASCAR, we were all worried, but no, it's entering a golden age, I think, of broadcasting because you're going to get the best of every world.
It will only boost. What's the one that the high tide races all boats? It'll only boost the others to go, oh, hang on a minute, we need to do something here.
And I'm going to very expertly cross now from a hot to a not.
Oh, okay.
How to broadcast a milestone race correctly compared to how to broadcast a race wrongly. What on earth was Fox on about? That was the worst Indy 500 I think I've ever seen in broadcasting.
Yeah, and Matthew agrees.
Yeah, it had high hopes, strong start with the broadcast team. And it was, I don't know if the pressure got to them, but to me, it was fumble after fumble after fumble.
Yeah.
Do you notice the graphic? The graphic was changing every 5 seconds. And at one point we thought, because we found out last week that Maluka's a Grimsby lad, and we then also found out that he went to the same school as Megan, and we then found out that he actually lived when he was here near us, down our street.
Really?
So, yeah.
Well, you've got a dog in the fight for the rest of the season now.
We were cheering him on when he took the lead of the race, and the graphic flashed up he was leading. I was like, he's leading. Oh, no, he's not. He's leading. No, he's not.
Yeah.
I was like, I wanted to punch it so much. But yeah, the graphics was annoying. I didn't like the start because you don't use the drone camera at the start of a race when you want to see the field coming up to the green flag moment. And at the end, you show the checkered flag.
Everyone's doing that at the moment.
It just didn't. This is the biggest spectacle. And Alex Palou, as I said, the most predictable winner has just won the most unpredictable race. And we were looking at Nolan Siegel backwards in the wall. What are you doing?
Well, yes, and we never saw a replay of that.
No.
They had to put it on social media on Monday because it never got shown on the broadcast.
I still haven't seen it.
I have. It's just a single car spin.
Right.
But if you were one of the 7 million people, well done to Fox for getting 7 million or whatever the stupid number was that they had watching the race on Sunday. A lot of them hopefully were with us, shaking their head at what we were saying. The timing tower, we talked about this before, isn't great and wasn't working very well. Timing and scoring went down. Well, the TV side of timing and scoring went down completely twice, to use the Pep meme, twice during the race. I think they were flummoxed by the delay at the start for the Scotty Mac crash, which is the biggest knot of the whole season. Goodness me. You feel the ground wanting to swallow him up.
Can I punch Kyle Larson in the face, by the way?
See, I think the fun thing was, oh, great, thanks, you've made us delay the start.
But
I think
still,
we've just for 40 minutes. I need to get somewhere else for my actual job, which didn't go well for him either.
To me, that just screams. That screams. He's only there to have fun. Everybody else is fighting for the championship. He's not there. It's a bit like a substitute teacher coming in and flipping off the headmaster. It doesn't really work, does it? It's just
no.
Yeah,
that's all gone down wrongly, and of course, it's ignited the Larson versus Verstappen versus McLaughlin versus etc. Greatest drivers in current motorsport cycles.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like it was a cookie cutter approach. As Joe, we do this for Daytona, copy and paste, no starting grid like the other races Fox broadcasted. Yeah, as I say, I think up until the Blackhawks, which was that was super hot.
That was cool.
I've already got a picture of that on my desktop on my work PC. As soon as Scotty crashed, it fell apart for Fox because Will's call of the start, which shouldn't have been free wide because the race was already beginning. No one explained to us that it was on lap 5 or 4, whatever it was, because the race hadn't officially started when Scotty crashed. And as Matthew's pointing out, the booth, the tower, the graphics, the sound mixing, and missing the winner, taking the checkered flag, all a sum total of really poor.
I hope you caught it in the booth because as we did, when they came back round, the timing tower started counting. So we thought, okay, this is lap 1, the race has started.
And the app was down at that point because we both went, me and Matthew, I think, both went to the IndyCar app to check to see what was happening while those laps were being run.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get onto the timing and scoring page on the app.
You might need multi-view for that, actually, because there's a timing tower on there. That's the only reason we knew, because it started ticking up to 200. But it's a mess, the whole thing. And for what teased to be a great 500, ended in a bit of meh again.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone was feeling.
Yeah, and I think the TV stuff takes away from what happened on the racetrack because there was action, there was drama, there was things happening.
Hybrid worked.
Hybrid did work.
Yeah.
The second half of the race was
was
fairly monotonous because not a lot was going on. Once it got single file, there wasn't much happening. And of course, we had those 2 lapped cars that weren't lapped cars in front of the leader.
Yeah, that was a bit weird when that happened.
Wow.
I hope my internet is not the one freezing. It might be.
No, you sound fine.
Oh, okay. I'm slightly worried because you were breaking up on my side.
Okay.
But it was abysmal. The whole thing. They need to have a bit of a look at themselves, and it all started because they had Danica Patrick on.
No, that must be it, mustn't it?
Yeah, gotta be. We know we're gonna put one in Canada as well. We ran lap 51 about 7 times. We did, yeah.
We did.
Megan and me were both stood in the comments box thinking, is it really still lap 51? 51? Are we sure? And we both looked at each other and went, yeah, we did it.
25-mile lap rather than 2.5 miles.
Also, one thing that failed on us at one point, and we couldn't work out why, the race control messages glitched at one point, and they deployed the red flag. And that's what I can't remember where it was. I think it was when Larson crashed. Just momentarily the red flag came out on the graphics, and I went, "Oh, red flag! They've stopped the race." You know, when the rain was coming down, and I thought, "Oh, they've stopped the race," but they haven't.
There was a caution before, I think, but yes.
So that was a bit of a mess, and made me look an amateur. What else happened at the weekend, bar the Indy 500?
Not Joe. Good activation for wieners, but do we really need that on the Indy 500 a weekend? I think not. And every time I watched the beginning, I didn't watch the actual thing because something happened. Where was I on Friday? Oh, I was here with the kids. But I watched the build-up, and when they went talking to all the drivers and co-drivers, they all came up with the same cutting the mustard lines and all that. By the time we got through the 3rd or 4th couple, it had got tiresome.
Also, the fact that it was 2 laps, you were done at the end of lap 1, and how slow they were going. And the contrived finish.
I didn't see.
It was literally, the leader was like way out front, and they backed off and went across.
Right.
It was like,
yeah.
Oh, and you had Will Buxton and the commentary team going, "This is incredible. They're really sticking the buns in." I was like, "Oh, for God's sake!" I would have. Yeah.
Is that what we said at the beginning? I don't know.
Yeah. I would have slung the headphone lead around me and jumped out the commentary box window at that point.
Will's white suit was also a
pay me. Yeah, you couldn't pay me. You couldn't pay me to commentate on that. I would have given it to Kevin Lee if I was honest. But
MotoGP to round us up from Silverstone. That was interesting, wasn't it?
Oh, another reason I could shoot Dawn it. Yeah. I missed the last 3 laps because I had to hand the commentary over to Megan. Yeah. I got to Formula One just as the World Feed was coming on to start the commentary, and USON too. But
another series that almost missed the winner taking the checkered flag.
That is also true with Marco Bezzecchi. First of all, great MotoGP race. Silverstone really gives us a great circuit, and the racing there is top notch. Negative, they can't promote it. TNT don't promote it. Dorna couldn't give a stuff if it's alongside the TT, which is on.
Yeah.
The tickets are too high, and the track doesn't even look. I said in the commentary how done I was with Silverstone when we came round into the loop, and Crypto.com sponsoring Formula One was still visible in the runoff area. I was like, you couldn't even paint it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, come on, guys. The crowd, every grandstand was empty. There was 40,000 there on Sunday, total of 99,000 across the whole weekend. Just to give you a comparison, Silverstone on Sunday last year had 124,000 people on Sunday. Across the whole weekend, they averaged out over 405,000 people. MotoGP couldn't even manage 100,000 people through the gates. It is shocking. Next year, it's moving back to its August date. Thank God for that. But for goodness sake, just give it back to Donington. I really say that Donington would be a lot better home.
Simon Patterson on the race podcast said, let Motorsport Vision promote the Grand Prix weekend at Silverstone because they do such a great job with BSB. There'll be 50,000 plus at Cadwell on Bank Holiday weekend in August for BSB. It's just a great weekend. And MotoGP in the UK is suffering at the moment through various things. Although all 3 races I thought were excellent. Rueda coming from the back in Moto3 again. That's like the 3rd or 4th time that's happened in the recent past where someone's been at the rear and come through to win. And Moto2 was pretty decent too.
Yeah, the same about Dixon really not winning it, finishing.
Yeah, he didn't have a very good weekend.
I think we've had a super hot with the Hawks, but what's our ultimate not for this week? Because there was some pretty bad moments.
Ride height devices.
Got it. Yeah, that'll do. 2 of them failing.
Cost Fabio Quartararo the race.
Nearly killed Alex.
Nearly killed Alex Marquez at the start in the race that then didn't happen because of the red flag because of his accident.
Oh, Mark's crash at Maggins Beckers was ride height.
Unnecessary. Absolutely, they are being banned in a couple of years' time, but they need to be off the things now.
Yeah,
because it's just causing too much problems. Oh, and the other hot was to David Munoz's bottom as he slid through fire at Luffield after he flipped the bike. The fuel cap came off. It poured some fuel onto the racetrack, which then ignited as he slid through it. And there is a shot of him sliding through. It looks like he's just exploded himself onto the racetrack, which is quite funny. He was fine, but the photo is cool.
I think Maddie said something along the lines of, "Oh no, now I can't say I've been the only person on fire in MotoGP paddock." Or something along those lines. So I was giggling about that, but yeah. By the way, if you ever want to, if you go to Maddie Patterson's, I don't know if she's put it, she's on Facebook, so it might be on Instagram. Watch as another Australian takes a win and how animated she gets in the media centre. Hilarious as well. Okay. Do you want me to round out the show because I think I'm a part-timer?
As you're here.
As I'm here. Take a look at our upcoming schedule. Stay tuned for Grid Live pre-race, our standalone shows to preview Formula One at Barcelona, IndyCar at Detroit, and NASCAR at Nashville. Sunday Grid Live wrap-up is 90 minutes after the Entity IndyCar Series race at Detroit. Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, Grid Encore, recapping the NASCAR weekend in the Music City as well. Please do continue to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for helping us reach the milestone of 1,600 subscribers. We're inching closer to our next now at 2,000 subscribers. You can hit the bell icon to get notifications so you'll always know when we go on the air, and follow all of our social media platforms and visit gridnetworktv.com. You can take 5 minutes to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. You can join Colin, Mark, Michelle, Robin, David, and Matthew who invest each month in the Grid Network. And we encourage you to join these fine folks, help us keep us on the air. And once we hit $500 per month, we can afford to send our team to the track more often and continue growing our media outlet. Thank you. The link to all of this is in the video description below. And if you want to make a one-time donation, you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link, get your name on the board, and invest as much as you want, and consider buying a specific on-air personality cup of coffee, and it will thank you on the air. For Kobe Lambeth and Matt White from Grid Endurance Performance Index, I'm Joshua Birch from JB Motorsports. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.